everyone, this is Maregaal Ben Yaakov. Welcome to my YouTube channel or Facebook wall if you're watching through Facebook. And before I get started, if you like my videos of the past or if you just want to right now, hit the subscribe button and the like button to help the channel out. And if you have any comments or questions, please leave a comment below. And I would highly appreciate it, and I'll try to answer all your questions if you have any. Well, today is Tuesday, June 28th, 2022, and it is, I'm here in Hot Springs, Arkansas, and it's about, 80 degrees right now. It feels pretty good. And anyway, my discussion today is, let's see, what can I title it? It's referring to the Gospel of Matthew. We're focusing on the Gospel of Matthew. And I guess the title could be, Why Will Jesus Condemn Most Christians According to the Gospel of Matthew? Whoa, that's a brain slap, isn't it? Well, here's a disclosure first. My name is Maregaal. I'm a ex-biblical only Orthodox Jewish guy, okay? And I only went by the Torah alone. I'm not Messianic. I'm not Christian, okay? I don't believe Jesus is the Mashiach, and he totally didn't fulfill anything regarding the Jewish Messiah. Nothing whatsoever. And he's not coming back. So, with that being said, I do not have a dog in this race, as they say. So, but what I want to touch on is what the Gospel of Matthew has to say about salvation and why you see particular passages where he himself is going to condemn followers in him, or Christians per se. And why is that? And so we're going to delve into that. Now I was watching what's conjured up this video was I was just going through YouTube, and this guy, he's a self-apologist, he's commenting on Matthew chapter 7 verse 21, or starting with chapter 21, where the Lord kind of goes, not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, shall enter the kingdom of God, blah, blah, blah. And I'm paraphrasing there. Let's see if I got, chapter 7 verse 21 through 23. And it says, did not we prophesy in your name, do miracles in your name, and cast out demons in your name? And it says, and I will tell them, depart from me, workers of iniquity, or those who practice lawlessness. Now, what you got to understand, there's several contexts at play with the Gospel of Matthew. One is, first of all, you cannot use modern living with, you got the Bible today, where you have all these letters, epistles, and gospels in one collection, And so what a lot of Christians will do, they won't read a book for what it says by itself and the message of that particular book. What they'll try to do is, make a message by grabbing here, some out of there, some out of here, some out of there, and formulate their own new message that maybe one particular author never taught that at all. So, because you got to understand, the Gospels were never meant to be read together. Like the Gospel of Matthew was for a certain community, and so the Gospel of John was focused on a certain community. And so another context is, what is the main question? What is salvation based on? According to the Gospel of Matthew, you have to ask that question. And the context is totally different from the Gospel of John altogether. John follows the doctrine of Paul, where you're saved by grace, and there is not one single law of Moses commandment in the Gospel of John, where the book of Matthew is chock full of them. I mean, a whole gob amount of them. And it is, out of the four Gospels, Matthew is the most Judaic. And there's a reason for that. And the message is strictly based, salvation is strictly based on Torah observance. It has nothing to do with Paul. In fact, the verses we're going to get in today, the Gospel of Matthew condemns the Paul crowd. Now, you got to remember, All four Gospels were written after Paul died and after the temple was destroyed. So they knew about Paul. And so there's some of that influence being put in the letters, in the gospel itself, and words put in the mouth of Jesus, for a reason to make the other crowd condemned, to make a point. And so you see this type of thing going on. So this is why you have a perfect prophecy like in Matthew 24, because they're putting words in Jesus' mouth. That's why it's so accurate, because they live after the fact of the temple being destroyed. But then all of a sudden it falls flat on its face, and Jesus never came back right after the destruction of the temple, as he bluntly says in 24 verse 29 and 30. It says, immediately after the destruction of those days, or the distress of those days, the sign of the Son of Man will appear, blah, 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 blah. Well, it never happened. And Jesus says in Matthew 6, and I don't want to delve on that, but I'm going to touch on it. But where you can see the author putting words in Jesus' mouth. But Jesus goes like this, and supposedly in Matthew 16, on the very last two verses of chapter 16, says, not everyone standing here, and now I'm paraphrasing, will taste death until they see the Son of Man coming in his Father's glory, or in his glory, or the glory of heaven, blah, blah, blah. So what he's saying is, some of you of this generation will live 40 more years, because the temple has to be destroyed, and then he comes back. Well, guess what? That whole generation got wiped out. And he got killed, not killed, but died off somehow. And so he never came. So it's just a false prophecy, but this is what I'm telling you, what the gospel is doing. They're putting words in Jesus' mouth that he never said. And if he did say it, that is a false prophecy, but I kind of favor the former, where they're just putting words in Jesus' mouth. But nonetheless, so that is like two contexts right there, is salvation. And so now another context is, who is writing this gospel? Well, all four Gospels are written by a Gentile, or Gentiles, I should say. And the Gospel of Matthew, to focus on the Gospel of Matthew, yes, he's a Gentile, but by the context of what's written in it, he is a Torah observant Gentile. It's like when Paul wrote the book of Galatia, there is a motive why he wrote the book of Galatia. It's actually a response letter to what happened. What happened in Galatia, now I'm throwing this as an example. When Paul went to Galatia, which is in modern day Turkey, basically, he taught them his bogus saved by grace message. The law is done away with. You have to believe in the complete work of Jesus dying on the cross and resurrecting, blah, blah, blah. And so he says all through Galatians, especially 5, if any of you get circumcised, you're obligated to do the whole law, and Christ will benefit you nothing. You have fallen from grace. Okay? He's very vividly clear. And he turns his back on the Torah, as you see in Philippians 3, and Ephesians 2 basically says, the Torah was like a dividing wall to separate Jews from Gentiles, and because the law made you righteous. Now, he don't say that. This is what Judaism teaches. The law is basically displays the very character of El himself. And so, but Paul sees it as like a thing that shows what sin is. Yeah, it shows you what sin is. Of course it is. But it's not meant to make you a sinner. It's mold you into the way the Lord wants you to be, what he likes, and it displays what he likes and what he doesn't like. And the law is very easy to do. And there is no such thing as original sin in Jewish thought process. That's a Pauline thing. So not to get on that. But so the third context is, okay, and go back to Galatians. Okay, so Paul goes to Galatians, converts everybody, Galatia, and converts everybody there, or whoever, a particular amount. So after he leaves, the James crowd, that's Jesus' very own brother, who's still a Torah observant, doesn't believe in the grace thing, and people of his crowd, or those like him, go to the same area and they convert to the real way they should walk. Because when you're grafted into the genuine Israel, not a fake Israel, you have to assimilate. Like if you want to come to America, you got to know English, you got to do this, you got to do that. You have to assimilate, know our laws, and then you become a citizen. So in the same way, if you want to be a part of Israel, you have to be circumcised if you're male and do all this law. And so this is what the people of Galatia started doing. They ignored Paul. Someone came, or a group of people came, taught them that Paul is full of hooey. You know, the Messiah never does away with the Torah, blah, 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 and they accept. And so when Paul finds out, he goes, "Oh my God, who has bewitched you?" As you see in chapter 3 of Galatians. And so he goes on and on and on, and he tries to win them back. However, we don't know their response back to Paul, like, "Hey, forget you, buddy, you're fake." So we don't have that response. So the author of the Gospel, Matthew, is one of these types, a Torah observant Gentile. We kind of know this because of how he misquotes, and he can't read Hebrew. One example is like in Zechariah chapter 9, verse 9. It says, "Behold, your king is lowly, riding on a colt." Single animal, basically a kid of a donkey. Okay, that's what it says. So it's only one animal. Well, Matthew screws it up. He basically says, he so-called quotes the scripture and says, "Behold, your king is lowly, he rides on a colt and a donkey." I'm like, can't ride two animals at once, man. So there you can see he can't read Hebrew. And he does this in a few other things, no oopses. But so it indicates he's a Gentile, can't read Hebrew. But he's Torah observant. So that's another context. So this gospel is written for his community, whoever it's for. And so when you come to, now I might think of other contexts. I know there's at least 3 or 4 of them. And let me, maybe I'll just go through this real quick. Another context, like I said, these Gospels, but Matthew included, was written after the time the destruction of the temple. So another context is all of everything that Jesus said is hearsay. Okay, hearsay or speculative, because we already established that some of the words the author put in Jesus' mouth where he never said it, like these prophesying things. So with these several contexts at play and at work, and now you kind of got a grasp understanding of it, when you read the Gospel of Matthew, you will see several things that promote a pure Torah observance life for salvation. And also, the author, like I said, all the authors of the gospel wrote after the death of Paul and after the destruction of the temple. And so, because Paul died in 62, 64 by being decapitated, according to Christian myth. So now we get to Matthew chapter 7, verse 21 through 23. It says, it goes on, like this one guy's watching, on YouTube. What's the context? And he's talking about, false prophets. And I said, no, the context is Jesus is talking to the whole crowd, and he's telling you several things. And one of the things he says, watch out for wolves in sheep clothing, blah, blah, blah. And, false prophets, and you shall know them by their fruits, because they're basically not practicing what they're preaching. And so then he just keeps going on about stuff. And so he's talking to the crowd, and he goes, look, not everyone who says to me. Now you can see what the author of Matthew is doing. He's almost pinpointing the Pauline crowd here. Now explain. It says, not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, shall enter the kingdom of my Father, kingdom of heaven. And on that day they will say to me, Did we not prophesy in your name, do miracles in your name, and cast out demons in your name? And he will say, depart from me, workers of iniquity or unrighteousness or blah, blah, blah. And so, well, hello, you cannot prophesy, unless the Spirit rests on you in Christendom. Now remember, I'm not a Christian. I have no dog in this race. I'm just telling you like it is, according to Christian biblical writings, the New Testament. And so, you cannot prophesy unless the Lord is really upon you. And you can't do miracles unless you have faith, and you cannot cast out demons, not like the one guy says in the name of Jesus who Paul talks about. Not like that, but they were still believers, you know what I mean? And so, but the key part is the ending part. It says, depart from me, workers of iniquity. Or lawlessness. It'd be better as lawlessness. Now, if you look in the Greek, just get a Strong's Concordance, even though it's more of a lamer concordance, it gets the gist, okay? The Greek word is anomia, and to basically summarize what that means is those who deliberately go against the Torah or who are ignorant of the law. Now, I just said Torah, but it says deliberately go against the law. And, oh yeah, that's another context I'll talk about. Those who go against deliberately go against the law, or those who are ignorant of the law and just break it accidentally. Now, here's another context I didn't think of, which would be like the fifth one. The context of the author is pretending to be basically an eyewitness or kind of there, give an account. And so what's the context? Jesus is in Israel, the land of Judah and the Galilee, and he's talking to Jews, okay? And that's what's going on. And remember, Israel was basically a theocratic government, okay? And so in order to be good in that society, you had to keep the Torah. Now, you could be like, it's kind of secular, and because Israel didn't have full authority because they're under Roman rule, it's one thing to talk about. But nonetheless, that's another context. So Jesus talking to Jewish people in a Jewish context or landscape, okay? And so when you say law, people know what that's talking about. It's talking about the Torah. And so, but here's where the rub is. When you see Paul, he is doing stuff like that, so-called prophesying, casting out demons as you see in the book of Acts, and doing miracles as you see in the book of Acts. However, he is not Torah observant. He point blank turns his back on it. And this is where the rub is with Matthew against 99% of all Christianity. 99% of all Christianity follow after Paul, okay? Who turned his back on the Torah, who was practicing Judaism, who was a Pharisee. Just read Philippians, he calls it all, Philippians 3, calls it all dung or manure now. And so he threw it away so he could grab hold of this grace. Well, Matthew, this Torah observant Gentile, is part of this James crowd. And the Gospel of Matthew is condemning the Pauline and all the Gracers and those who never practice the Torah. In fact, other places, now here's another point of Matthew that shows the Gospel of Matthew is promoting a salvation based on Torah observance, based on works, okay? Not this fake Christian works, oh, I have to do all this. No. You have to do the Torah, the Sabbath, the feast, the food, the tzitzit, the tassels, that is, the tefillin on your forehead, which I wore, not because I'm a Christian or Messianic, that's what Judaism teaches. So now let's look at Matthew 23, okay? First few verses, it says, now I'm paraphrasing, it says, Jesus spoke to the crowds and to his disciples. He says, the scribes and the Pharisees sit in Moses' seat. Okay? which that means is they're teaching the Torah. He says, all that they tell you to observe and do, that's preaching the Torah, it says, that observe and do. So he's telling you to obey the scribes, what they have you to do, and obey the Pharisees, what they tell you to do, as far as the law goes. But then it doesn't even need to be said, but I'll say it. I mean, like I said, it doesn't need to even be said. But he says, however, do not do like they do, because they don't practice what they preach. In other words, they're hypocrites. And so it says they wear the phylacteries too broad, which is a box. You're supposed to put it right there, but modern Judaism puts it right on top of their forehead and right up here, so it'll be close to their heart. Biblical Judaism, you put it right on your hand itself and smack between your eyes. So it has to be small enough to do that. So he says they make their phylacteries broad and their tzitzit or their tassels long to be noticed by men, blah, blah, blah. So that has nothing to do with like what the blunt statement says. Obey the Torah is what he's saying when they teach you the Torah. Okay, obey it. So here's another thing that promotes Torah observance as the way of salvation. Now there's another thing in here for Christians who think Jesus is God or God the Son or thing like this. Jesus outright denies he's God at all, and this is what I'm about to tell you. In Matthew 19, okay, this is Matthew 19. A rich kid comes up to Jesus. Now I'm paraphrasing. I might put it right here so you can read it yourself. That's kind of like I do my videos, so you're not thinking I'm full of hooey. It's right there. You can read it. It's in its context, okay? Anyway, a rich kid comes up to Jesus and says, "Good teacher, what must I do to inherit the kingdom to come or life after death?" And he doesn't say that. That's more modern. And, the kingdom to come. And Jesus point blank denies he's God here. He goes like this: "Why do you call me good? For there's no one good but God alone." Well, hello, he just denied he's God right there. He goes, "However, if you want to enter into life," now here's a blunt question, blunt answer. Everything else after this has nothing to do with the blunt answer, okay? He's just kind of going on, but because other questions. But he goes, "However, if you want to enter into life, obey the mitzvot, or obey the commandments." Commandments of what? The 10 Commandments? No, all of them. 613 commandments. All of it, from Genesis to Deuteronomy. All of it. All the ones that pertain to you. I'm not a woman, so I don't have to do woman commandments. I'm not a king, I don't have to do king commandments. I'm not a livestock owner, I don't have to do those commandments. So all the ones that pertain to you, you have to keep. And he goes, "All these I've been pertaining to my youth." What, blah, blah, blah. You don't need to read any of that. But, so he says, obey the commandments. That's the way of life to come. And so this is what Matthew is teaching, okay? Now I'm going to go to my notes because I think I pretty much wrapped it up almost. So I got okay, here's, another thing that shows that Jesus is not God. As the disciples say, teach us how to pray. It says, "Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be your name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as in heaven. For yours is the glory." So he's not claiming to be God, and he's not the Father in the flesh, because he just says, "Who art in heaven." So, okay, blah, blah, blah. So anyway. And what is interesting about like the salvation thing is in the Gospel of Matthew, when the 2 thieves are there, you cannot crossbreed the Gospels. You've got to emphasize that. You cannot crossbreed them because you're just tainting what the author is trying to say. He has his own version, his own message. And so when the 2 thieves, see in Matthew, there's only 2 thieves crucified with them. None of the "today you'll be in paradise." That's in a whole different gospel altogether. It's not in Matthew. It just simply says, and there's 2 thieves crucified next to him. That's all it says. And so anyway, so let's see see if I'm missing. See if I got it all. Then if that's the case, we'll wrap it up. I said several contexts. Yep. not by an eyewitness. So there, okay, I just said, nothing was eyewitnessed by the Gospel of Matthew, the author, because he wasn't there. He's a Gentile. By a Gentile, I couldn't read Hebrew. Talked about that. He was a Torah observant Gentile. Yes, most Jewish of all. Yes, the Gospel of Matthew is the most Jewish, and it has the most laws of Moses referenced, like even the tefillin, the tassels, go to the temple to offer up, when the leprous people, I believe that, I might be mixing that up, but I believe that leprous people were told to go offer the offerings that Moses commanded, blah, blah, blah. There's a whole bunch of them. Salvation in the Gospel of Matthew is a Jewish perspective, and so, yeah, the paradise one was in Luke. Today you'll be with me in paradise. So that's in Luke, not in Matthew. You cannot cross the two. I talked about Matthew 7, rich kid. Matthew 23, 19 is the rich kid. Lord's Prayer, just said that one. What else? So, yes. Yes, so basically, according to the Gospel of Matthew, this is not me, not Maregaal talking, but according to the Gospel of Matthew and what it says and how salvation is attained, according to the Gospel of Matthew, 99.9% of all Christendom shall be condemned and go to hell because they refuse to keep the Torah, like it says, those who depart from me, workers of iniquity or lawlessness. And that word anomia means those who are ignorant of it or those who deliberately sin against it. Now, when it comes to mainstream Christianity, they deliberately, ignorantly, but deliberately sin against it because they believe salvation is attained by grace because of what Paul said. Now, Paul never, ever met Jesus at all. But James did, and if you read Acts 21, James was the very brother of Jesus, and he, 25 years after the crucifixion, him and the whole crowd are still Torah observant. Why? Why? He is head of the church, the so-called church. In fact, it wasn't a church, it was a sect within Judaism. They were just Torah observant Jews, We don't even really know if Jesus or James even believed Jesus was the Messiah versus just more of a law interpreter, and they were just doing the law according to the interpretations of Jesus, like how Hasidic rabbis are and their students are. Okay, there's a certain law. The rabbi says it should be observed in this way, and so his disciples practice that law according to what that rabbi teaches. So we don't know. It's my guess. It's most likely like that. But because the Messiah of Judaism doesn't die. He's not born of a virgin. He's not God. He doesn't come down from heaven. He's a genuine physical son of David through sperm. So. Anyway, so 99% of all Christendom are going to be condemned according to Jesus, according to the Gospel of Matthew. Now, if you want to sidetrack and talk about the Gospel of John, then 99.9% of all Christians are saved according to John because it's based on grace and only simply believing in Jesus, and that's it. So, but the Gospel of John is false. It doesn't follow Judaism, okay? And you got to understand, the Messiah, the true Jewish Messiah, the Jewish Messiah, when he comes, it's not like the Pauline stuff. He ushers in a new covenant in his blood and the Torah is done away with. No. The Torah is eternal, okay? It's eternal according to the law. And when the Messiah comes, he sets up a theocratic monarchy where he governs the whole earth, and the law of his kingdom is the law of Moses that Moses supposedly got on Mount Sinai. Okay? So this is why the whole premise of mainstream Christianity is entirely false. The law was not done away with. Jesus is God has no son. The Messiah never dies. The Messiah never conceived in a virgin girl. None of that. So Anyway, that's my take. My name is Maregaal, Ben Yaakov. Hit that like button and subscribe button, and we'll see you next time.